With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Sam Abul-Samad from Navigant Research.
I'm Rebecca Linland from Rebecca Drives.
And so the gang is all here again, once again, I guess,
finally.
after a while. But last week, Sam, you had the episode with Ed Niedermeyer and discussed his book Ludicrous, so that was cool that we were able to squeeze that in.
Yeah, and the week before, I posted up a podcast that I did for somebody else. Right now I'm actually in California in Santa Clara, doing a talk tomorrow. As we record this, it'll be tomorrow. By the time you hear this, it'll probably be in past tense. But at the Drive World Expo at the Santa Clara Convention Center, and they had somebody doing a series of podcasts leading up to the event, and so had a talk with Jack Heslin about the panel I'm moderating on Thursday, which is about the road to level 5.
Is it paved with good intentions?
Good intentions and lots of potholes. Yes.
Cracking yourself up over there.
I do. Look, if nobody else is going to laugh at my jokes, by golly,
it's a typical. The road is typical of what you'll find in Southeast Michigan or in San Francisco, which means it's not going to be smooth.
Look, if we don't move on, I'm going to start singing "He's Not Heavy, He's My Brother." So we should just move on. And by move on, I mean let's talk about what we're driving.
Wait, did Rebecca introduce?
Oh yes, she said that she was from Rebecca Drives. If you
Okay.
if you want to go to find out what she's got on her mind about cars, you should go to RebeccaDrives.com.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Do it now while you listen to the podcast. Because you have like short reviews and stuff.
No, you know what? Listen to the podcast first, then go read it.
Then go read. Yes. And yes. I have 200-word reviews.
See, that's pretty good. That's a
challenge to get a meaningful review into 200 words.
Well, because you've done it, Sam. You've contributed.
I've attempted it.
Yes.
I've crept over that 200 word threshold a little bit. But
That's okay. I fixed it.
They have to be meaningful. Oh,
Yes.
that changes everything.
I know, right?
I used to write like 1,500 meaningless words for Autoblog.
Hey, maybe we should do like the Tinder of automotive reviews, so all of them are really meaningless. That's a good idea.
Yeah, and we could do like a car buying app. We could call it like Driver instead of Grinder. Never mind. All right.
Oh boy.
So
I know, our listeners missed us.
I missed this. So Sam, while you are
3 minutes in and we're already off the rail.
Yeah. Let's get us back. So while you are in San Francisco, you are driving pretty much like 2 studio apartments around in the vehicle.
More, yeah, or at least 2, maybe more. I think you could probably have 6 people sharing an apartment the size of the Lincoln Navigator, and it would probably cost them each about $1,000 a month.
And judging from our Slack, which nobody else can read but us right now, you will get the impression this is definitely not the ideal vehicle for San Francisco.
No, I mean, and we've talked about the Navigator before. I think probably all 3 of us have driven it at various times, and we've talked about it on the show before. And as big luxury SUVs go, it's hard to beat the Navigator. I mean, it is really nice. But in San Francisco, if you've ever driven in San Francisco, it is like, especially in the city, it is any vehicle of this type, not just the Navigator, but Escalade or any big SUV is like the antithesis of what you want to be driving in San Francisco. You want something that's small and nimble, easy to park, because it's a challenge to park anything in San Francisco anyway. And it seems like the highway lanes around here are even narrower than normal in other parts of the country. So, with all the traffic here, you're always on the lookout. Fortunately, this thing, it has, a full suite of driver assistance features. It doesn't have lane centering, unfortunately, but, it's got a lane keeping assist and blind spot monitoring and adaptive cruise. And that the adaptive cruise in particular is crucial if you're going to drive in the Bay Area, because the traffic is just nuts. It's 36 miles from here to San Francisco. I'm in Santa Clara right now in the South Bay. 36 miles from where I was earlier this afternoon in the Soma part of San Francisco, and it took me over an hour and a half to get back here. It's just crazy, the traffic. But the 30-way power seats with the massage system in there. Oh man, is that nice to have when you're sitting there stuck in traffic? You want to fidget around. Just turn the massaging seat on and just let it do its work on your backside. It's fantastic. I love that.
Awesome. I do. You know what? I had the Navigator back, I think last year. Yes, last year and I happened to be in California as well, but I was in Southern California, and I picked it up, I want to say in San Diego, and I drove it up to the KBB offices in Irvine, and then I continued up to Santa Monica, and it was actually really, really good. Like I was as I was navigating, no pun intended, as I was navigating through terrible LA traffic, I was really pleasantly surprised at how well it drove, how well it handled, and it didn't feel too big. That's what I was absolutely shocked about, actually.
Well,
yeah, it doesn't feel as enormous as it is, but it is still enormous. Unfortunately, the one I'm driving is not the XL, which would really be ridiculous for me driving around by myself.
Yes.
So this is the standard length Navigator, and actually the active park assist feature is actually really good. It's very helpful for when you want to parallel park in San Francisco, because it'll measure out those spots for you and figure out, is there enough room to actually manipulate this vehicle into the space? And when there is, then, you activate it and just let it do the steering. It's still, the older style system. Some of the newer vehicles that have these systems, including, I believe, the Aviator version, you don't actually have to shift back and forth between reverse and drive and hit the brakes. It does all that automatically. But this one just does the steering for you and tells you, okay, now stop, switch from reverse to drive or drive to reverse, whatever. And it steers the vehicle into the space, and did it in one nice, clean, seamless motion. And I've over the last couple of days, I've done both perpendicular parking and parallel parking, and it works really well. So that's, in a vehicle this size, it is very handy to have that.
Well,
and it's actually getting surprisingly decent fuel economy, given that I've been driving in mostly stop and go traffic. It's averaging 18 miles per gallon.
That's not that bad. Is it doing a lot of start stopping?
It is, but the start stop system is fairly seamless. You really don't notice it most of the time. And the Navigator, like all Lincolns, is quiet inside, and there's enough isolation that even when the engine restarts while your foot is on the brake, which is that's the scenario that most people complain about most, is when you're sitting there at a traffic light, if it's a long light and the engine restarts, you sometimes get that shudder. There seems to be enough isolation in this thing that you barely notice when the engine's restarting. And this is not a vehicle you're going to be drag racing with from every red light, because chances are there's going to be a car stopped in front of you right on the other side of the intersection anyway. So even if you have to wait half a second for it to refire, it doesn't matter.
I thought you were going to say, because chances are there's going to be a Tesla next to you and they're going to accelerate faster. But
well, no, actually, I mean, the chances are, yes, there will be a Tesla, but it ain't going to be accelerating any faster either, because nobody's going anywhere quickly around here.
It sounds like you love the place.
They are burning money at a prodigious rate, though. That's what
they are.
Yeah.
Hey, that's Silicon Valley for you, man.
Yeah.
With the exception of a handful of really big companies like Apple and Google and Facebook, startups are built to burn money.
And boy, are they good at it. I am surprised. I guess a little surprised that you don't like the size in the city. Although I think, because my experience parallels Rebecca's a little bit, is I've really liked having a larger SUV for my city excursions lately. But on surface streets, it does get to be a little cumbersome. I think if you're on something like the 405 or the 5, it is probably better.
Yeah, it's more of an issue when you get into the city, especially like San Francisco. If you spend any time driving around in San Francisco, there's a lot of really narrow streets, and in some cases they've gotten even narrower in recent years as they've increasingly put in things like protected bike lanes, which is great.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's good. That's good. Be car hostile, please.
But for a city like that, this is the wrong kind of vehicle for this kind of city. A lot of, as you said, the driving dynamics of it are actually shockingly good. Given its physical dimensions. It doesn't drive like it's as huge as it is, but it is physically large, and it doesn't matter what it drives like. When you have a large vehicle in a small space, you have to be very careful maneuvering around. And I would, driving around San Francisco, I would much rather be in a Chevy Bolt than in a Lincoln Navigator.
You don't find that it got that certain bit of intimidating gravitas where you can just put it where you need to be instead of.
Well, I mean, when it comes to intimidating other drivers, yes. But when you're talking about movable Navigator versus immovable objects, being buildings and curbs and all other obstacles, that's a very different situation.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the kinds of situations where intimidation is just not going to be of any real benefit to you.
Did you do any bullet style driving with it?
No. And frankly, it would be hard to find a place in San Francisco where you could actually do that these days.
I think with the EcoBoost though, you could get that thing to just sail.
oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. I mean, 400 horsepower, it's not that it doesn't have the performance capability. It's just finding the physical space to do it. I mean, if you've ever watched Bullet, that version of San Francisco from 1968 does not exist today.
I don't think it existed in 68 either. They just closed the streets.
Well, probably not, but I think it was much closer to reality than what exists here today.
I think there's an opportunity for them to make a Bullet Edition Navigator in Highland Green. And then they could do a commercial that's just the absurdity of watching that thing fly over the hill. I think it would be great. Just recreate the chase scene with a Navigator. Lincoln, call me. Let's do this. All right. So, but before you left, you were actually in a much tidier SUV still.
So an SUV that actually would have made a lot more sense in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Which is the Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrifoglio. And we talked on numerous occasions before about the Giulia, and I've previously driven the 2-liter Stelvio, and I finally got into the Quadrifoglio. And actually, I did have a chance last year to drive the Quadrifoglio at the Mama Spring Rally at Road America. So I've driven it on the track, and it's an amazing vehicle. That 2.9 liter twin turbo V6, 505 horsepower, designed by Ferrari, is a fantastic engine.
Man, does it sound good.
It does sound amazing, especially when you put it in dynamic mode. and just, open everything up. And, having the all-wheel drive on there, gives it that extra little bit of stability that, makes it much easier to drive at speed. And, last week while I had it, I took it for a road trip to go to Columbus from my home near Ann Arbor to Columbus, Ohio, to visit Honda. Honda was doing a safety event at their R&D center in Marysville. And so, I got the chance to put, several hundred miles on it. And, when you put it in natural mode or automatic mode, it's a little more, it doesn't feel, it's not something that, is going to beat you up. It's very comfortable to drive. The sound, the exhaust, closes up that extra valve in the exhaust system that makes it a little more sedate sounding. So you can spend several hours in this thing, on the highway or driving on country roads without feeling like you've been thrashed for hours. It's not like driving the Navigator by any means, but it is something that you could easily use for a road trip and, come away feeling relatively refreshed. And, it came with adaptive cruise control and lane keeping assist and things like that, which, when you're doing a long highway drives, are nice features to have. Didn't have the kind of traffic to deal with that I've had out here this week. But it's a great vehicle, and, the seats are really comfortable. They're really supportive when you're driving it hard through corners, but they're also very comfortable for a long trip. It got actually surprisingly good fuel economy. Got about 23 miles per gallon.
Well, you had the throttle open the whole time, so there's no pumping losses. It's just.
Oh, okay, yeah. I knew there was a good reason why. It's good explanation for that.
Just trying to help.
Yeah. Since the last time I drove the Giulia and the Stelvio, they've added in Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which worked really well. And it's controlled by the center rotary controller, so that was good.
That infotainment system, the last time I was in a Stelvio, really, it felt like it felt like not as expensive as the rest of the car. It felt very FCA, and that's not to say like bad, but just like
not even high end FCA, like compared to the latest Uconnect systems. It's not as capable as those, but it works fine. And with Android Auto and CarPlay, it's even better. The only real downside to this thing is it costs $95,000.
Well, you got to pay to play, man. That's
well, and that included $8,000 for the carbon ceramic Brembo brakes. So, if you can forego the carbon ceramic brakes, which unless you're going to be taking it to the track on a regular basis, you probably don't need the carbon brakes. They are fantastic when you're driving it hard, but you probably don't really need them.
Yeah,
so you can save a bit of money there.
It's so funny to listen to you, Sam, because so much of what you said, I wrote when I had the Stelvio in the fall, because I wrote it about the fact that the potholes of New York, it really took them with amazing aplomb. I couldn't believe how nicely it rode, even though it was this sports CV. I mean, it really is. It's a sports car that's an SUV, and the one that I had was 85,000, so it didn't have the ceramic brakes, but it was so good. I love this car. I think it's just tons of fun.
And if you live somewhere with winter weather, just get a set of snow tires for it, and with the all-wheel drive, because the all-wheel drive, you can't get all-wheel drive on the Giulia.
Right.
And this one does have more ground clearance. So, when I had the Giulia Quadrifoglio last year in February, I had it, when we got 10 inches of snow right after the Chicago Auto Show. You remember that storm that hit the Chicago Auto Show last year? And then it swept through southern Michigan. And I came home to find the Giulia in my driveway with 10 inches of snow on top of it. And with 3 inches of ground clearance, doesn't matter how good your tires are, 3 inches of ground clearance ain't getting you anywhere. So the Stelvio, is a little more manageable if you want to drive it year round in those kinds of conditions.
Yeah, no, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I love it.
So, I guess the sort of elephant in the room with Alpha is how is it going to hold up, and I realized that after a week with it, you don't really have much of a handle on that. But just watching the relaunch of Alpha in the US, and not really the Stelvio, but just the Giulia has had the opportunity to get into some long-term fleets, and the results have not been promising. So
yeah, car driver had a couple of issues with theirs.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, that like a $90,000 car, it's unique, and maybe if you have the money to spend on it, you also, it's sort of like the Tesla owner thing where you can put up with it. It's a luxury car, you live a luxury life, and it's not that much of a disruption if your car needs to be down for the count for a while. But if you really need to rely on it, I'd be nervous about it. And I hate to say that because it's such a wonderful, different offering on the market. And I would younger Dan, older Dan would tell younger Dan, wait until these things are like super cheap and you buy the cast offs of the rich because they've gotten tired of fixing them. And you buy them when they're 10 years old and learn how to fix them. And then you drive something quite nice for short money. I mean,
I'm glad this thing exists. If I had the kind of money, if I had $100,000 to spend on a car, chances are it wouldn't be the only car in my garage. So, as you said, it's probably not really that much of an issue for anybody that can actually afford it. I would, if I could, I would probably have one, but I can't. So there.
I'd still have a hard time paying that much for a car.
Well, you wouldn't if you had millions of dollars. I mean,
I think that, some of the most skinflint people I have ever run across are the ones sitting atop the largest pile of money.
Of course, yes. But I don't know if I've told this story before about when I worked on the Ferrari 250 GTO story out in California, out in Seattle rather, that there were 3 Alphas that showed up. Two of the owners of the garages, one was a caretaker of one of the Microsoft executives. The other one was my friend Greg, who had an Alpha, who owned the Ferrari 250 GTO, and then my friend Tom, and he had the Giulia. And now Greg has switched his Giulia for a Stelvio now. But, it says something that these people that can buy anything they want, their daily drivers are the Alpha products. And I mean, in Carmel, out at Monterey Car Week, they were everywhere, and they weren't dealer plates. These were personally owned vehicles. They were absolutely everywhere. It was incredible. It was.
You do see a lot of them, like in Monterey and even here in the Bay Area, a little bit further north from there. When you get off of the freeway, you will find a fair number of them around, a surprising number of them around, and also in LA.
People want something different. That's what resonates with them is that this is not something that you're going to see every day. It has a lot of driving enjoyment for in their minds, it's under $100,000, and that's their price point.
Well, and
but
too,
they were everywhere.
So I mean, and your friend Greg may not be sort of the best representative of it, but did he buy it or did he lease it?
He probably bought it.
Yeah,
he tends to buy his. I'm my friend Tom, I believe, leased his. But these are people that can buy pretty much whatever they want.
Right, but I mean, even like a high end lease, like puts you in something new and different, and I mean, the payments are high, but it's
and it's fun to drive. That's what they look at, and they say, this is something. If I'm going to have a daily driver to the office has got to be something fun.
It's
And
choice,
that's what
and
they
if you
have.
have the
It
means,
is.
I recommend it.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's
And
just,
even
you know,
even if you go for the the base 2-liter version, even that one, that's 250 horsepower. That one is also fun to drive, and it has that unique look that doesn't look like an Audi or a Mercedes or a Lexus. It
it's
stands out in
something
the
different.
crowd.
Right.
Yeah.
It's something different on the road. And, speaking of Monterey and Pebble Beach, I was a judge at the Aston Martin event that they had on Saturday, where they have the Sunset Center in Carmel, and they invite Aston Martin owners to come and talking to them, because I judge not just the car, but the story behind the car. Why did you buy this vehicle? And the theme was so consistent across the board that it was something different, that it not everybody has one, like a Porsche or something, and that it was just such a consistent theme. And I think that's what we hear with these Alphas too, that it's something different.
I mean, I'll buy that. It's hard to not. It's hard not to like an SUV with a Ferrari engine. I mean,
As long as it doesn't have a Ferrari badge on,
Yeah,
that would be
exactly.
sacrilegious.
for now,
We don't want no Ferrari SUVs should ever exist. But this is as close as we should get, and I'm glad it exists.
Do you feel really that strongly about it, that there should never be a Ferrari SUV?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
You have to draw the line somewhere, Dan.
I
mean, we've got a Lamborghini SUV now, a Bentley. Come on.
Yeah.
There has to be somebody who forgoes the SUV craze.
And if there is somebody, I would vote for Ferrari as well.
I don't know. I mean, if I'm Ferrari, I'm just like, oh, we could make so much a lucre. The filthy lucre.
They already do.
I know, but they could make so much more. I don't know. I'm not invested enough in Ferrari to really get offended by the idea. I just hope if they do it, they execute better than Bentley or Lamborghini, because man, the Bentayga is just so hideous, and the Urus is boring as shit.
I will say the DBX from Aston is gorgeous. It looks like an Aston. It has beautiful lines to it. It's actually surprisingly large from sitting inside of it. I was very, very impressed by it. It's very pretty. So
right.
You'll have to reserve judgment. They'll show it. The full uncovered soon.
Okay.
Well, let's pivot.
And then, just before we do, real briefly, I also, in between the Gladiator or the Stelvio and arriving in California, I spent a few days with the Jeep Gladiator. And it's like driving a Wrangler, but with a pickup truck bed on it.
Yeah, it's like driving a Wrangler towing a trailer. That's just,
yeah.
And it's
but the thing, this was an overland, it was trail rated, and I think Rebecca and I both drove it back in June at the Chrysler What's New event.
Yes.
And on the off-road trail, and aside from the longer wheelbase, meaning that your breakover angle is going to be a little bit less than what you can achieve with a Wrangler, which is shorter. Everything else, it has, all of the off-road capabilities of a Wrangler. So if you need to go like literally just about anywhere, but you also need a bed to haul some stuff in while you're doing that, the Gladiator is your machine. And there's nothing else like it.
There isn't. And I was actually really surprised at how long it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big vehicle, but really, really capable.
But yeah, and it's interesting because it is long, and I've sort of I guess carped about that a little bit, but it doesn't drive like it's that long most of the time in most situations. It's
no,
fine.
It doesn't at all. The drive and the handling was really, really nice.
Yeah.
Like the Wrangler.
Yeah, it's very.
I agree.
It's very, very Jeepy. It doesn't like highways for the most part. At least the Gladiator that I drove for, I drove a Gladiator for all of like 60 miles. But yeah, it was like we're good at 65. You don't have to go faster today. That's fine.
I didn't have any complaints about the way it drove on the highway. It seemed to track well. I did drive it not on the highway, but I took a couple of the roof panels off, the front roof panels off.
Oh, fun. Good for you.
And that was quite windy. But otherwise, fun. I left the doors on this time. So if it's not inexpensive. The one I drove was $55,000. But like I say, if you need a pickup truck that can go, virtually anywhere, the Wrangler is probably your best choice.
Well, yeah. And how long have we been clamoring for this? And I think
did I say Wrangler? I meant Gladiator.
Yeah.
14 years.
At least
14 years.
Yeah. Well, actually probably longer. When did they last build the Scrambler? That was in the late 80s.
Oh, the Scrambler, the last Scrambler was 84.
But they showed the Gladiator in 2000 at the 2005 Chicago Auto Show.
Right. But wow. Even before that, there were Jeep fans that wanted a return of the Scrambler.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's about time.
But smartly though, they didn't make it like a Scrambler in the sense that the Scrambler was like a 2-door. It was
back in those days there was no 4-door CJ. Right. And, that was still in the CJ days.
Right.
So, today, very few, if anybody, buys, a standard cab pickup truck of any kind. They want crew cabs and extended cabs. So, I think it was the right move to do a 4-door. The only, as pickup trucks go, I guess, maybe the one downside in this thing is the bed is, I think, relatively shallow, compared to some of the other mid-sized pickup trucks. But aside from that, it's got all the functionality you want.
Yeah, they've been pretty clever with it. The way that you can prop the tailgate too, so if you need to haul sheet material, it'll actually fit atop the wheelhouses in the bed, and then the tailgate will support it. That's clever. And there's more RAM under the Gladiator than you think. And
the frame is actually a Ram frame. It's not a Wrangler frame.
Yeah, and it's got a Ram 1500 rear axle for the most part.
Pardon
me. So I think this is basically the high-end version of a smaller Ram pickup that's going to come at some point. I think
agreed.
We'll see that. And that's good. I think they've done a nice job with it. But yeah, let's pivot for a moment to the vehicle that's gotten you in trouble this week, Rebecca. Because I never have this kind of luck that you have. I usually wind up with the summons.
So I'm driving the 2019 Honda Civic 2.0 liter 4-door Sport, and it's atomic red. It's so bright. It's just absolutely, as my mother calls it, it's arrest me red.
Yeah, sounds like it blends in.
It's the same red as my wife's car.
Yes, and it nearly lived up to its name. So this one is it's a little bit unique in that it is the 4-door Sport as opposed to the hatch. It's got 158 horsepower, 2.0 liter engine, 4-cylinder, 6-speed manual, which I was delighted to find out. However, the manual is so good and it's so much fun to drive that I had only driven the car a couple of miles, and I was coming down a hill on what's equivalent to like the Boston Post Road here. So it's 2 lanes in each direction. And I exceeded the speed limit.
This is in Greenwich that you did this?
This is in Greenwich.
Okay.
And it was at night. It was late at night, and sure enough, I looked down and I was going 15 miles over, and I put my brakes on, but not in time. And I was only in 3rd gear. And so a officer of the law pulled me over, and I said
Did you cry?
Explained, no,
that never works for me either.
It never worked. I did that when I was 20, and it didn't work, and I've never done it again. So no, I just explained to him. I said, I told him what I do. And I said, I was testing it. And I said, honestly, this is like,
Don't you know who I am, officer?
Right. Hey, you know what? Everybody in Greenwich says that, though.
Yeah, exactly. Don't you know? Well, that is
but everybody
funny.
in Greenwich hasn't been on TV as often as Rebecca has.
That's true.
But it is kind of funny because, he does hear all these crazy stories about what people do here. And so I just told him, I said, look, I realized that I was going fast. I immediately put my brakes on. I said, I understand. And I said, I was in third gear. He's like, wow, because this thing is really fast, isn't it? I said, it's just surprisingly so. And especially because it's not even the turbo. But I think I honestly take such great joy in a manual transmission. So we had a nice little chat. And then he, took the license and the registration and stuff. And then he was gone for a while, which of course had me concerned because I thought, gosh, maybe some of my other, indiscretions have shown up. But in fact, no, he just came back and he said, I didn't know what to do with a distributor plate. Right.
Oh, I love it when they do that because I'm like, yes, that just means a warning.
It's California distributor plate. And then he goes, do you live here in town? And I said, I do. I said, I just live up the road. And he's like, oh, okay. And he was super nice. He was absolutely lovely, as the majority of Greenwich cops are. I have always had very nice interactions. I actually take self-defense class with the Greenwich Police Department. So he was lovely. But yes, I got out of the ticket. He just gave me a warning, which was awesome. And don't you know, the next night, coming home from the train station, there I am going 50 miles an hour again. So I slowed down. So I'm trying to be very, very careful. But it's hard because this car is so much fun.
Well, and one thing that might help you is I have a test of radar detectors that I will be publishing in the next couple of weeks.
I would love that.
But yeah, there are radar detectors that can warn you so you can speed with impunity.
I don't know if they're illegal in Connecticut.
They are not. They are legal in all 50 states except for Virginia. In 49 states except for Virginia and DC. Because DC is part of Virginia. So
right. Okay. Oh, that's good to know. No, that would be good. Because I do think, if I had a radar sitting up there, it may have aggravated the situation.
Might have tweaked his
may have tweaked his interest a little.
Yeah. Like, oh, what's that? But, nothing.
But the car itself is really good. It's so much fun, and it's got a ton of safety features in it. It's not luxurious, it's pretty stripped down, but it's $21,000, $21,150, and then $920 for the destination. So just over $22,000 for this just really, really fun sedan. And, it has 18-inch alloy wheels. It has Honda Sensing Standard, which is
that's standard on all Civics this year.
Right. And that's fantastic. So it has adaptive cruise. It's got the collision mitigation braking system, the forward collision warning, the lane departure warning, lane keep assist, road departure. These are such fantastic safety features that will help young drivers and drivers of all experiences, really. But I think especially young drivers. And so, I really like that. It's got the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto integration. And it's just overall, I just think it's a terrific vehicle, especially for that price point.
Yeah, I agree. When we were buying our Civic a couple of years ago, at that point, the Sport is a new trim on the sedan this year for 2019 model year. When the hatchback came out, they had the Sport on the hatchback from 2017. And the Sport trim level is basically the base EX or LX trim level, but with bigger 18-inch wheels. And in the case of the hatchback, because the hatch only comes with the turbo, the 1.5 turbo, you also get an extra 6 horsepower, so bumping it from 174 to 180. And at that time, I'm not sure if it's still the case, but at that time, if you got the Sport hatchback, because it was based on the LX trim level, it had the base radio, which is the non-touchscreen radio, which means you didn't get Android Auto and CarPlay. Right. I think they've now made that standard, that radio the touch screen radio standard across the board now. Yes. So, you get that in there. And plus, now you also get the the Honda sensing package as standard equipment. Previously, it was an extra cost option, which we paid for. But yeah, I mean, it's a really good value. I mean, the main two reasons we didn't go for the Sport 2 years ago was the radio at the time, and also the 18-inch wheel. Living in Michigan, figured having that little bit of extra sidewall with the 17s that are on the EX trim,
Right.
Was probably more useful than whatever little bit of extra lateral acceleration you could generate with the 18s and the slimmer tires. Because I've had to replace a couple of wheels over the years, due to pothole damage, and so I figured that the 17s would be a better choice. But yeah, I mean, it's the Civic, the current generation Civic is a fantastic car in pretty much every respect. And personally, if I was buying again, I would do as we did and actually go for the hatchback as opposed to the sedan for that extra utility, because there's so much space, so much useful cargo space in the back there. If you're, if you putting things like, roll up inflatable paddle boards back there and, all kinds of other stuff.
Inflatable things. Sorry.
He's snickering about it. It's excellent.
It's just more useful, more practical than the sedan. Sedans, especially, modern sedans that are usually like that coupe-like profile, you tend to have a very small trunk opening. And, having the hatchback, I find to be very handy.
Yeah, no, I love the hatchback. I agree. But, if we think about, like the
hatchback,
traffic,
you get the turbo.
Exactly. But when we think about like the traffic that you're struggling with this week, Sam, if you can have that opportunity to have a sedan or a hatchback, to have a car basically, rather than an SUV, at least it's fun. And I actually had a manual transmission Acura Integra when I lived in San Francisco. And let me tell you that you perfect your hill control very quickly. And that was, of course, before the days of hill assist and all those different things when I lived there in the early 90s. But it's, it's a way to reconnect with the car, in my mind, to have a manual transmission and to have a car for your commute as opposed to an SUV.
Totally agree.
And that dovetails really well with one of the cars I was driving over the last 9 weeks since we've been away. I had a Toyota Corolla SE with the manual transmission, with the 6-speed manual. And so it's about an even match for the Civic Sport in terms of price. I'm sure that the Civic Sport is sportier.
Yes.
The Corolla's not bad. I think that they've really cleaned up its I guess the sort of the impression it leaves. In SE trim, it felt good to drive. It had really good steering compared to the BMW I drove the week before that did not.
Saying something.
Yeah, no, I was like, wow, this thing has awesome steering. The chassis tuning was good. It's the new TNGA platform, so it's pretty solid. It's a good sized sedan. It has a good sized trunk. It's practical. You can just flog it forever, and it's gonna just keep coming back for more. So all the things that make the Civic another flavor of the same kind of thing. It's just a good solid sedan for $22,000 and has a manual if you want to shift for yourself. I think that I enjoy driving manual Hondas better than I do manual Toyotas because the programming, the throttle programming was a little weird and sluggish on the Corollas. So it would do things like ignore when I was blipping the throttle especially for heel toe downshifts where the pedals weren't spaced right. And, all that stuff seems to be better on Hondas.
Well, I mean, the manual transmission is supposed to be engaging. It's not supposed to be a punishment.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're right. As if you can't afford, an automatic.
Right. It's not like it used to be. Right. And
right.
Now, especially there are some cars where you pay extra, right, for a manual. I can't think of an exact example, but maybe that's true. I don't know. I would. Especially if it's good.
I mean, how many even offer? I'll maybe because I'm supposed to be writing for Forbes now as well. Maybe I'll write something about that because I think that might be kind of interesting to look at who is still offering manual transmissions, especially like as a reward as opposed to a punishment.
So how did
it's increasingly rare?
I would love to find out from our listeners who has a manual transmission today. So why don't you tweet that to us?
Like whose personal car is a manual, you mean?
Yes. Let us know. I'd love to do a little survey of our listeners to find out who currently drives a manual, whether as their daily driver or, frequently or just has one in their garage. I think that'd be fun to find out and what it is, of course.
I'll put up a Twitter poll on the Wheelbearings cast account.
Okay, cool. That'd be fun.
If I had a garage, I might have one. But how did the Civic do? Like on the highway, would it settle down and cruise at like a decent engine RPM and that kind of thing at like say 60, 70 miles an hour?
You know what? I didn't drive it. I'm trying to think.
Well, I mean, how does it do in town when you're doing 70?
It's fine. No, actually, no. I did drive it on the highway. It was in stop and go traffic because it was Sunday in the summertime, but it was pretty good. It was quiet. I was again pleasantly surprised, especially because Hondas historically have had trouble with road noise,
right? And
so this was very quiet, very well behaved. It's always difficult. When I'm in a manual, on the one hand, you get such nice torque because you can control the downshifting and being able to move around. At the same time, especially in stop and go, it is something that you have to think about. Do I, how quickly can I get this thing going? So I think but overall it was very good. It was, I just enjoyed it. Yeah. It's one of those cars that I look at and think, what, you can stay a while. It was nice and quiet. It was funny. I did kind of struggle at first with the radio of all things. I couldn't seem to find the right source. It was just a weird little glitch, but me in technology and I can break it if you need it to be broken. But once I got that sort of sorted out, we were friends again. And so, it handles really nicely. I really think that it's just a terrific car. It was totally fine on the highway. I didn't drive it a lot. I probably drove it 50 miles round trip on the highway. But certainly around town, it parks itself, it parks very easily. It can fit anywhere. It's, a really nice size. And the visibility is actually really good in it as well. It's a manual seat, which I don't always like. I do wish that they would spring for the electric seats because I think it helps drivers of all sizes be able to.
But it's a very comfortable manual seat.
It is a very comfortable manual seat. It is. And I was able to adjust it, sufficiently. And so especially for that price point, we talk a lot about how incredibly expensive vehicles are. And I think you get just an awful lot of value for your money from Honda these days. And I do think that they're going that little extra step. The materials are nice. The fit and finish is really lovely. They're going a little bit further than some of their competitors. And they have to do that, right? Especially with like Hyundai and Kia, as we've talked about in the past, really upping their game. And of course, our favorite Mazda, but they've got to do this. And so it's imperative, I think, to stay relevant, to stay competitive.
Yeah. So that was the thing that I found. It's funny that you say, it was quiet and it was sort of settled, because that's where I found that the Corolla sort of fell down. It was actually kind of loud, and it was geared short. So I'd be doing like 3,000 RPM on the highway. And it'll definitely, like, you could definitely crank it up speed wise. You just have to wait a little bit. So it reminded me of the cars that I sort of cut my teeth on. the cars that I learned how to drive, where they weren't all that powerful. They had manual transmissions. You had a high amount of control. It was really hard to get in trouble with them. Trusty handling. And, like you said, all the positives that make a solid car, the good visibility, the decent size, all of that are there. So I'm glad that we got to sort of compare and contrast the two. And I think the Honda probably wins if you're shooting them out in terms of sporty small cars. That the Honda's probably the one to get.
Yeah, I'd love to see Toyota up its game and do those.
I think they have.
Well, but I also, I preferred the Accord to the Camry. I thought the Accord was more engaging and nicer to drive and more fun and quieter and more refined and more luxurious and just more.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean is that, I think that these two volume products, the Corolla and the Camry versus the Accord and the Civic, I think the Honda comes out ahead of Toyota.
Yeah, I won't argue with that. And then so let me finish up briefly here to like the other couple of things I was driving. I drove a BMW 330i xDrive, and the short take on that is like it's a good luxury car. It's not a real good enthusiast car. Its steering is not
like
great.
how you hesitate.
No, I mean it's not the 3 Series we once knew. It's fine. Its handling is a little weird. It rotates funny in the middle of turns. It's entertaining once you get used to it, but boy, for the first couple days, does it mess with your inner ear.
What does that mean?
So you'll be in the middle of a corner, and it'll start to feel like it's initiating a slide, initiating oversteer, and it doesn't.
Oh.
It just moves. It rotates a little bit, and it sort of takes a set. So most cars, they do that all at once. They all of those moves are choreographed so that it does the rotation and takes a set and settles, and you can hold the wheel in the middle of a corner, all the way from a middle of a corner to coming at the exit, and you don't have to correct your line. That was not the case with the 330i.
Wow.
It required a few corrections. It was fine. Like, I don't think it's a big deal on the street. I think if you're trying to drive a slalom or something, it's going to be a bigger issue. But it was a lovely car in terms of just a nice sedan that drives well and has plenty of power. I liked the engine, and I like the way it looks. I like the iDrive and all of that stuff. It's a good car. It's not the classical 3 Series. It's the 3 Series that it needs to be, though. Like I don't think that's a problem.
Right.
But the one that I probably had the biggest surprise with is the Cadillac XT6. And Sam, I know you drove this as well. But I was super. I just was anticipating not being impressed with it, and it has won me over.
Your hesitation is hysterical.
Because you look at it, and I say it's won me over, but you got to remember that, press fleet cars are not necessarily the base model. And that is definitely the case with the XT6. So this is a 70,000.
A premium luxe or a sport?
It's a I got the Monroney here. It is the premium luxury. So It has the let me look at packages here, because it's very well equipped. It's got the platinum package, and it's also has the platinum package includes like all of the stuff, all of the technology and the
I think fully maxed out, you can get an XT6 up to about 75.
And so this one is this one is 70. And so it's lovely at that price. I don't know that what does it start at, like 56, 57, something like that?
No, actually it's about 53.
50. Okay, so the $53,000 one is going to feel a lot more like an Acadia. And that's not good. But looking at that as a starting point, what I was impressed with was how the XT6 really makes a point of how important it is to sweat the details, because what makes this really good, in my opinion, are that they went back through this basic car that is the Acadia and the Traverse, and
Actually, it's not.
it's not
No,
really.
no, it's actually based on the platform from the XT5. So it's about, they took the XT5. It's about 2 inches wider than the XT5. The wheelbase is about a half inch longer, but the body is about 9 inches longer, and it's taller than an XT5. So that you have a more upright seating position. But it's based on the XT5, not the Acadia. It's not based on the Lambda platform.
What's it based on then? Just the XT5? They have their that's the
yeah,
C1XX.
Yeah, the XT5 and this it's actually a mix of a bunch of different stuff. It's partly there's some Lambda bits in there, and there's some stuff from the Theta. GM actually isn't using those Greek letter codes for the platforms anymore, but it's closer to like the Equinox Terrain with some upgrades from what used to be known as Lambda.
Okay, well it's interesting. It's a mashup of all that stuff, I suppose. But the things that I didn't like about some of the other similar vehicles in GM's range, like the steering. The steering in the XT6 is fantastic. It's weighted perfectly. It has, especially in sport mode, it's accurate. It has some steering feel, which was quite a surprise in a 3-row Cadillac front wheel drive SUV. And it the ride, the same thing. It really, from a driving perspective, it's very good to drive. It's very disciplined in its body motions. The 3.6 liter V6. Some of the complaint is that this is a heavy vehicle, and that's probably not enough horsepower, even though it's got I think like 315, something like that. It's plenty. It gets right out there, and it moves with traffic. And I walked away really impressed. When I went into it thinking, oh, the Aviator is going to completely mop the floor with this thing, and then I walked away going, no, I don't think so. I think that
that's only because you haven't driven the Aviator yet.
Well,
how was the interior? I mean, Sammy, you've driven both, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do they compare, especially from an interior standpoint? Because I spent time in the XT5, and like Dan, I loved it. I thought it was. I actually had another car that same week that was arguably newer and nicer and more expensive, and I ended up taking the XT5, but I didn't like the interior. I just liked the way it drove better.
Yeah, the interior of the XT6, when we first saw it in January at the Detroit show, it definitely looked more low rent. The production models are definitely improved.
Okay.
Between January and now, they definitely made some changes. Whether it was just a matter of the show cars that they had in January were just not, up to production snuff, or they made some changes. They heard the complaints and made changes. Regardless, the interior is definitely an improvement from where it was. But if you've been in any recent Lincoln, it's not up to the same standard as current generation Lincolns, including the Aviator.
Sure. Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Yeah. So it's nice. It's, when we talked about it last month, after I did the media drive, I said at the time, it meets expectations. It's very adequate. It meets the minimum bar for what you want in this segment, in a premium 3-row crossover. But it doesn't really, I don't think it really, stretches. It doesn't exceed expectations in any aspect that I can see.
Well, maybe
the only thing about this thing where I think it does, beat the Aviator is in the third row room.
Really? Because the third row room is not great here. It's like the cushion's on the floor, and it's not that big.
the cushions in this, on the XT6 are up higher than they are in the Aviator, so you do have a little more comfortable seating position. It's not, we're not talking Escalade huge here, but I think for a crosstown trip, and I sat in the third row, when we were getting a crosstown drive, in DC with this thing, and it was perfectly adequate. You're not going to take a cross country road trip. I don't think you're going to want to spend. I don't think an adult is going to want to spend hours and hours in that third row, but to go out to dinner with some friends, I think it's perfectly adequate, and I think it's better than the Lincoln in that respect. But that's about the only place where I would give the Cadillac the edge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. So my critiques were, it's funny because they put a lot of detail into. I agree that the interior is not great, and GM is obsessed with all black interiors right now as well, at least in their press cars, and I think that's.
Please stop with piano black.
It's bad.
I'm just going to say that.
Like, this has carbon fiber trim that just, to me, looks so chintzy. I don't care if it's real carbon fiber, because that's also just plastic. And so, like, it's not a luxury material to me. You can't make fiberglass a luxury material. You can't make carbon fiber a luxury material. Not a thing that I am interested in seeing on the dashboard. The all black theme, I think, actually does two things. So it brings the materials that are real quality. It sort of brings the impressiveness of the presentation down. Like, this has Napa leather. It's got an upgrade to Napa leather. It's semi-aniline Napa leather, which is very nice. But when it's surrounded by everything else that looks black, and you see the lower parts of the door panels are, sort of that black, like, somewhat cheaper plastic, because it's the lower part of the door panel. It doesn't have to be as expensive. You have a hard time gauging sort of just how much effort they've put into making it nice. I'm a little offended for potential buyers of this, that you've got to actually pay extra to get leather on the dash and door uppers, and they nickel and dime you a bit.
Yeah. And
there were still some weird oversights. Like, it doesn't have auto hold. Where it'll hold itself at a stoplight. It's like, that's a little thing, but it's a thing, like, it's a luxury car. It should have that. There's no,
it's a thing that you can get in very basic cars today.
Right. There's no 110 volt outlet. Again, it's a family car. And like, that is a feature that gets used all the time.
But it does have a lot of USB ports.
It does.
Including USB Type Cs.
Yes. So
in all three rows. So,
that's the thing, is that when you hear and see something in a non-luxury vehicle, you start to expect these things.
Right. So the Corolla had auto down, all four windows were auto down, auto up. This one, the front windows are auto down, auto up, and the rear windows where you had to hold the switches.
No way. Are you kidding me?
No.
The $20,000 Civic has auto up.
Yeah. And in the front, I get it. And in the rear doors, like, I get that it's more expensive, and you need to use a couple more sensors for pinch protection and stuff, but still, like, it's a luxury car. It's a $70,000 car.
Those are the kind of moves that drive people crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Again,
it has Alcantara on the pillars and the headliner, and it's very nice. It was the new version of Q is really good. I actually like it with the control knob, the volume knob. I thought it was easy to navigate, so I'm pleased that system has matured. But yes, the interior in this, if the interior in the XT6 looked as good as the interior in the Kia Telluride does, they'd be ahead of the game.
Yeah.
But that's part of the problem, though. That's part of the competitive landscape. It extends down to something like a Kia or a Telluride, where you can legitimately say that those interiors and the overall experience is the same or better than this vehicle that is, $10,000 more.
Well,
and it's a Cadillac.
Yeah, I think the Cadillac drives a lot better than the Telluride does.
Okay.
But the Telluride, Telluride has more
I liked
space.
the Telluride a lot.
I liked it a lot as well. the Telluride has a lot more. Well, not a lot more, but it has more space, I think. Especially if you're using all 3 rows. But the chassis guys deserve a gold star because this thing is it's really good to drive.
'Cause you had it in New York City, right?
I drove it to Manhattan. The guys at Edison Quick Park on West 44th loved it. They were trying to figure out what it was. They were like, "What is this? A 20? Is it a Cadillac? Cadillac?" I was like, "So what do you think?" They're like, "I love it." They were tearing around the garage in it. It was great.
All very safely, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's a good car to have in the city, because it's I don't know, it's just about the right size. It's not as huge as an Escalade, so it's a little better size, and if you don't need to carry,
it's much more manageable for an urban environment.
And its ADAS is pretty good. I don't think it's dynamic cruise is all that graceful, so it'll make you car sick and stop and go. But yeah, I mean, we put a boatload of miles on this thing. Like I think I've put close to 1,000 miles on it, which is a lot for a press car. We don't normally rack them up like that, so I hope I don't get in trouble. But I think in terms of, I'm trying to think of like what you'd cross shop it with. Certainly the Volvo XC90 comes to mind. And again,
XC90, Aviator, the 3-row version of the Lexus RX.
Yeah, so it drives better than the Lexus, drives better than the Volvo.
GLE.
Acura MDX.
I think it's going to be a better value than the Mercedes. I don't know that it's going to drive better than the Acura. But so I think it's competitive. I think you're right though, Sam. Like it's not like mind-blowingly better than everything. It's definitely in the hunt, and if you want to try a Cadillac, like it won't necessarily do you wrong, but it's not amazing. My concern about the Aviator is that it's just going to be more expensive. Because
if you go to the Grand Touring, yes, the plug-in hybrid. But if you're just looking at the gas engine versions, they're actually pretty close, and the base price is on the base price for the Lincoln is actually about $1,000 less. I haven't done a full direct, equipment comparison, but I think they're in the same ballpark. So the pricing is actually pretty close on the gas Aviator versus the XT6.
I think that Lincoln maybe has a few more ownership, a more positive ownership experience with the Lincoln Way, with the Black Label. Yep. I think that they offer some really nice services. In my review of the Aviator, I talked about making sure that you not only compare it, because there is a lot of competition, but also look at some of the services that come standard with the Lincoln.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really what's going to separate it is how they support you and what the dealer experience is like and the ownership experience is like. But yeah, I was more impressed with the XT6 than I expected it to be. And so my initial impressions were not that great of just like seeing it. I was like, well, that's not all that great. But it looks good, and I think it'll sell well. And I think it'll probably make more profit per vehicle than the Aviator does. But maybe Ford has that figured out. I'm just concerned about that rear-wheel drive platform versus the front-wheel drive platform, and they've got that.
I don't think that that's necessarily a significant difference in cost. Especially because the Aviator shares its platform with the Expedition or the Explorer. Yeah. So there's that's a lot of volume there. There's a lot of scale there.
Yeah, but Explorer prices are high, aren't they? They're expensive.
Well, but right now they don't yet have the basic. They're not offering the base Explorer yet. So yes, the cheapest Explorer you can buy right now is considerably more than it was last year. But they have a base. Yeah, they do have a base version that'll be coming later this year. That'll be more affordable. That'll start around 32, I think. But the Aviator, Reserve, the standard Aviator starts at 51.1 with so 52 and change with delivery. So it's about $1,000 less. The Reserve starts at 56. And then if you go all in, on the Black Label Grand Touring, which is the plug-in hybrid, then you're up to $88,000.
Say that's $100,000,
but there's no, it's $88,000, but it's all that's a very different vehicle. It's a very different kind of driving experience from what you're going to get with the XT6. As good as the XT6's driving dynamics might be, the Aviator Grand Touring is on a whole nother level.
Well, I will have to try one, and then I'm sure I will tell you you're right. I'm glad that they finally brought this thing out. It's like 5 years too late, and it's
really. I mean, back 10 years ago, when they brought out the first batch of Lambdas, the original Traverse and Enclave and Acadia, there were rumors then, that they were going to do a Cadillac version of that as well, and it never happened.
They should have.
They stopped and started multiple times.
Well, they were going after the sedan, the European sedan market.
Yeah, I mean, but they've done that like 5 times, and none of those times the cars are good. Don't get me wrong, but it's not been successful. So just and we saw Lincoln do this. Lincoln was like, "Yeah, we're not doing that. we're gonna take the Edge and we're gonna make it nice inside. We're gonna here you go." And
ironically, what they've come up with now with the Grand Touring is more competitive, against the current crop of big luxury SUVs, than the Cadillac V's really probably ever were.
Huh?
Yeah, which is very ironic.
Yeah, I mean, it's just shy of 500 horsepower, 630 foot-pounds of torque. This is a shockingly quick vehicle.
Yeah, that thing moves. For sure. This is not a graceful pivot, although it's sort of a hybrid. I forgot to mention that I got the chance to drive the 2020 Karma.
Oh,
you drove it too? I drove it up in Traverse City.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you did.
So where did you drive it, Rebecca?
So I drove it at Pebble Beach.
Oh, so that's not an ungraceful pivot. Let's talk about the Karma, and then let's talk about Pebble Beach.
Well, it is a little bit. I mean, I didn't mean to. I wanted to say it before I forgot.
So you drove the 2020 Karma.
I did. So they also announced the base price at $135,000. And so they announced it August 15th.
I mean, that's kind of a lot of money for a zombie car.
For a zombie car, it was fun to drive. I was very surprised at how harsh the ride was, especially because it's not adjustable at all. And Sam, I don't know if you had this, and actually I know some people at Karma, and they did admit later they thought, that I don't know if it was just the vehicle that I happened to have.
You driving the blue one?
No, it's white.
Okay, so that's a different one than the one I drove.
Okay.
The one I drove was a blue pre-production model.
Well, and these are pre-production, which yes.
Right.
But
it sounds like it was a different car. Might have had a little bit different setup than the one I drove.
Well,
it was tight. Yes.
So is this the Karma, like the Karma GT or the Karma Revero?
No, the
Revero GT.
Revero GT.
Yeah, the Revero GT. And it was definitely, I mean, the launch control was loads of fun. I think I did a 4.4, 0 to 60. And that was with 3 people in the car, actually. So there was a good amount of ballast in there. It gets, has 80 miles of all electric driving. And then it has a total of 360 miles overall driving range. And it was fun to drive. The handling was nice and tight, and the steering was nice and tight and responsive. But it just, the ride quality, and it totally could have been the vehicle. We hit a pothole that I thought I was going to have a bruise on my bum. and this was on a California road, and I don't know if it was just almost like a crease in the road or something, like a frost heave almost. I still feel it today. But
I think they must have had a different setup on that one than the one I drove, because up in Traverse City, where we were driving it, the roads were pretty bumpy, and it was by no means plush, but I didn't find it to be that objectionable. It was definitely more, it sounded like it was definitely more compliant than the one that you drove.
Okay. Yeah, but it, the thing itself though it was fun to drive. I mean, it had that feeling of driving the future, which is fun.
And for those in the audience that are not familiar with this, this is the car that started life as the Fisker Karma a decade ago. And
right. So that's what makes it funny when you say it's about like driving the future.
Fisker Automotive, went bankrupt in 2012 or 13, 12, I think, whatever. And the assets were bought up by a Chinese automotive supplier named called Wangshan Group, who also bought up the assets of bankrupt A123 batteries. And, in 2016, at the time that the company went bankrupt, Valmet, a Swedish or a Finnish company, was actually manufacturing the Karmas for Fisker. They were doing assembly of the vehicles in Finland. And, they had a bunch of leftover parts at the time they went bankrupt. And Wangshan, when they bought up the assets, they got that stock of leftover parts, which included body shells, the tooling, and about 1,000 engines and battery sets and motors. And so what they did, they revived production. They started making new bodies. It still looked the same as the original. They just basically changed the badging from Fisker Karma to the Karma. The revived company is called Karma Automotive, and the model is the Revero, but with the original design. And they continued using the GM 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo that they had stock of, and they built out those. They used up the remaining stock of engines they had. And during that time, over the last couple of years, they've been re-engineering the car, and reworked it around the 1.5 liter BMW turbo that they use in the i8, with an updated battery with more capacity, new motors, new power electronics and everything. And it still has the same basic shape as the original, but all of the external skin, all the external body panels are different. It's a little bit cleaner, softer design, new front fascia, new lights. You'll still recognize it, as an update of the original Karma, but I think it looks really good. I think they did a good job on that. They've updated the interior a bit, and that the launch control system actually works really well. And it's really, really easy to use. You don't have to fiddle around with doing a sequence of switches and shit. All you got to do is put your left foot on the brake pedal, hold it, put your right foot on the accelerator, press it all the way to the floor, and then release the brake pedal.
Well, that's what we used to do. That's how we used to launch.
Right. It was pretty awesome. It was great.
And I think as much as I've made jokes about it being, a zombie car or just an old design, like that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we think about some of the cars that we have loved the most throughout the years, right? Long serving designs. Think about like the Jag XJ, where the same basic car got re-engineered more than once. And just there's a long string of cars that debuted in like the 50s and 60s that made it all the way from all the way up to the 70s and 80s. They have very long runs. And so, if we have a modern version of that, I don't necessarily think that's a terrible thing. So it's just interesting that they've done so much work. Like they got this shell of a car company and they decided to make a go of it. And it's interesting to me. Sounds like they could use somebody to tune their suspensions now, though.
It's pre-production, so we'll see. I'll go the next time I get to drive it. I'll have an open mind.
And they're not aiming to be a mass market company. They're only planning to sell about 500 Revero GTs a year. They're working on some follow-on models, a couple of additional models that'll be a little bit higher volume. But even then, they don't intend to become a high volume manufacturer. Back when I interviewed Henrik Fisker a decade ago, when they first launched the company, he was talking about doing 15,000 cars a year, 15,000 Karmas a year. And, clearly that was, not going to be a viable plan. It never got anywhere close to that. I think, prior to bankruptcy, I think they sold about 2,100, 2,200 cars over the course of about 2 years. And, in its new iteration, the company is taking a much more realistic view.
Well, so that sounds like it was a sort of good entry to Pebble. So what was that like this year? 'Cause it seems like that's where everybody with a straw hat goes
Yes.
to walk around on a golf course. I would feel I'm interested
And brightly
in
colored pants and jackets.
Yes.
I'm interested in a lot of those cars, but I don't know that I would fit in that atmosphere.
Of course you would. I would help you. I think
Rebecca will get you all
Right.
properly dressed up.
Right.
Yeah,
Dan, basically,
Fix your
Dan,
hair.
just it's one of those like parental discussions. You have 2 ears in one mouth. Use them in that proportion. Don't talk. Yeah.
No, I think just what really struck me with Pebble this year, I went to, so this is Monterey Car Week, and there's a whole slew of events that go on. I started out at 7 a.m. on Thursday going to Carmel, where we had breakfast at this Katie's restaurant where you have to get in line even at that hour of the morning. And and then we watched the car parade come into Carmel, and it just, people were walking around, crawling all over the cars. Everyone was lining the streets as we saw all these, beautiful examples going by. And then Friday was Quail, which is this very beautiful car show. It's $950 just to get in. And that includes food and drink, but you got to drink a lot and eat a lot to justify $950.
I mean, that and the cars that are there that are like, admittedly, they're fascinating, but like this is car dressage. Like
Yes. So, and then Saturday, normally I would go to the track to Laguna Seca, but I as I mentioned,
that's what I want to do there.
Oh my gosh, so much fun. This year I didn't get there. I had a different schedule than I normally.
I mean, you were trying to eat $950 worth of wine and cheese. I get it.
That was Friday. Saturday was Aston Martin. I was judging the event, and then we had a couple other things to do in the afternoon. But what kind of struck me, and then Sunday, of course, was the big, the Pebble Beach Concours, and it's such a celebration of the car in a way, and people's relationships with their cars in ways that we just don't hear of anymore. The industry is under such duress as we move from mobility as a personal feature of our lives to service and just a service. It's just something, and you don't have a relationship with your car anymore. And it really struck me that there was just still such a desire and love of the automobile that we often don't see anymore in the media. And it was wonderful. I mean, it was really, there's a sense of camaraderie there. There was a sense of celebration, of appreciation, I think, for the history. And of course, then also we had, some products debut. Acura debuted a sedan there. And just, I don't know, there was just something that had a lot of, there was a lot of positive interactions with the vehicles that, again, we just don't seem to have that much of anymore. So it was lovely. I loved it.
So, tell us more about what you actually do when you judge. Because I mean, we're all look. We all judge everybody. Like,
Not judge.
we judge your cars, but like when you're actually a judge for like what do you do? What does that entail?
So this was Aston Martin does a separate little event for their owners, and actually it's open to the public as well. But the initial one is the initial couple of hours first thing in the morning is they invite their owners of their vehicles to bring the cars to the Sunset Center. That is a performance center, actually, typically a performing arts center in the middle of Carmel. And so what I've done 2 of the last 3 years is I do the V8 engine vehicles built at Gaydon, and these are typically DB11s a lot of times, and
Advantages.
and Vantage as well, right? And but it was really just about the conversation about people that had a very deliberate choice to buy these vehicles. And so the first time that I did this was in 2016, and 2 guys that have now become friends of mine, Nelson and Brian, they actually won for their they have a DB11. It's not new though; it's actually a number of years old, and it wasn't the newest car there. It wasn't the fanciest car there, but they did a couple of things. First of all, the car is named Pegasus. They call her Peggy. Second of all, their dog, Coco, actually they have Brian So's matching harness and dog pillow for the dog to match the car.
I mean, that's a bit much.
With he matches the Aston Martin stitching. It's brilliant. It's hysterical. And
it's hysterical. How much does it cost? It's like about the same as like a year at maybe a good college.
If you have to ask, you don't belong there, Dan.
See, this is my problem with it.
No, stop. So this is the thing: is that most of the people bought their car used.
Well, yeah.
So these are second owners.
But even a used Aston Martin is obscenely expensive.
Yeah, it's $75,000. The majority of people there pay between $70,000 and $90,000 for their vehicle. Seriously,
that's a lot of dough for a car that you like. That's not a daily driver, like.
It could be, but most of them have other cars.
I do like that a lot of those cars are.
I think if I added up all the cars I've ever bought, it would barely come to that.
but I like that there's and maybe this is watching it from afar you don't quite get this idea, but a lot of those cars are driven and enjoyed, and they have patina on them, and the owners aren't afraid to drive them, to use them, and that's what they're meant for, and a lot of those owners will flip you the keys. And
so the overall winner. So I'll just recap quickly. So the last year, I did not judge last year, but that winner was this fabulous woman named Layla who recovered from cancer, and she treated herself to this absolutely stunningly gorgeous DB11 in a cinnabar, like a cinnamon color that was just gorgeous. And then this year's winner for Gaydon V8 was a gentleman that I think is Lee Harvey's name, that he actually he bought his DB11, and then 2 of his friends bought Aston Martins because of his ownership experience, which, at the end of the day, again, his car wasn't the newest, but it was, at the end of the day, it was the relationship that it had with his car, and he convinced 2 of his buddies to buy them as well. So those were the 3 quick winners, but the overall winner is such an incredible story. It's this guy, and he has a vintage Aston, and I apologize, I don't have my notes here on which one he had. I think it was a DB5 maybe, or a 6.
Did it look like the James Bond car?
It did.
As a DB5.
It was red, though. It was gorgeous. And he actually worked on that car in his teenage years. And then the car was sold. and then it was sold to somebody else, and eventually ended up as basically a garage find. And when he found it again, it needed a ton of restoration, but he had become successful, and he was able to buy the car and completely restore it. And he showed us the car that he used to work on and detail as a kid. I mean, it's just a
That's cool.
fantastic
I mean,
right?
If I'm ever successful, maybe I'll be able to get, it'll be interesting to see how that event makes the transition from generation to generation too. One of the things that I think they noticed this year was that the auctions that sort of went along with Car Week,
Yes.
the overall amounts were down.
They were. So I went to 2 of 3 auctions for RM Sotheby's, and pretty consistently, the reserve was the winning bid was below the estimate, and sometimes below the reserve, and so the car didn't end up selling. And the market is definitely a little soft right now. There's actually a fantastic app that I found called Hammer Price, and you can follow along any auction for like the last 6 years, and it updates live as you go through the auction. So it was fascinating. It's Hammer Prices, it's what it's called, and you can review everything and then see what sold. And of course, we had the now already infamous, even more so infamous, quote unquote Porsche, not the Porsche brand, but what they consider the first Porsche. I'm sorry. The vehicle that they say was the first one that was
the earliest Porsche branded vehicle.
Well,
no, it's not Porsche branded though.
It was Porsche branded after.
Right, the Type 64, the 1939 Type 64. It was made by Mr. Porsche, but it wasn't Porsche at the time.
That's her Professor Dr. Porsche.
Right. It was designed and driven by him, but it wasn't the Porsche car company. And they are, as somebody who was at Porsche last week in Atlanta, they are very clear to say it's not a Porsche. We have nothing to do with this car.
I mean, it's an interesting car, and I don't think anybody will dispute that.
Well, and they went in without a known buyer, I believe, which is not very common. They typically have a good idea, or of some kind of, very elegantly raised hand when you're trying to sell something like this. So it was a bit of a high stakes auction anyway. And then what happened was the auctioneer,
Oh yeah. I forgot about that.
yes. So what happened is the auctioneer actually, if you listen to the tape of it or the video of it, it is hard to hear what he's actually saying. And having been in the room, there are times when I've had trouble hearing what he says. He's originally Dutch, and he speaks a number of languages, but it sometimes is a little difficult to understand what he's saying. So Martin Tenholder is his name, and he's based in London. So he already has a little bit. He's Dutch with a British accent. And what happened was they started the bidding on this wall, which I don't know that he has visibility into, that he can see it when he's up on the podium. And so he said the bidding will start at 13 million, and they put up 30 million. And then it jumped to I think it was 16 million, which became 60 million, and 70 million, which was actually 17 million, but became 70 million. And as this is happening, the room is going crazy because it would be the most expensive vehicle ever auctioned by far, far and away exceeding the 48.5 from the Ferrari 250 GTO. So, so this was this building and building. And then all of a sudden he turned and was like, no, we're at 17 million, not 70. And of course, then everyone was in an uproar and they ended up stopping the bidding. And I think at the end of the day, there actually wasn't a bidder in the room. I don't think anybody was actually, I mean, I think there were bids on it, but they weren't going to meet reserve, and they ended up just stopping the bidding. And so they're going to continue to try and sell it to somebody else. But it really was an enormous embarrassment and a huge disappointment to the Pebble Beach auctions, which are another highlight. That's always a lot of fun to participate in and to go to.
Yeah, well, I mean, at some point somebody's going to buy that thing. Even like $17 million, like that's a lot of money for a Proto 356.
I think the high. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rebecca, but I think the highest price for a car sold at Monterey this year was that McLaren F1 that went for just shy of 20 million, right?
Yes.
Which
I believe that's right.
That's also bonkers. As much as I love those are like those were one of the poster cars when I was younger. But those have never cost less than $1 million. But no, 20 million?
They were $1 million new, and they had plans to build 300 of them, and they're even despite winning overall at Le Mans in 1995, they could not sell 300 of them. They ended up only building 106 of the 300 that they planned to build because there just weren't buyers for them, even at $1 million. And now they're going for anywhere from 10 to 20 million dollars.
They're an amazing car.
Oh yeah,
sure. No, I mean, one of the fun things so at the Thursday RM Sotheby's, they had technical drawings so Thursday was all Aston Martins. So they had technical drawings for an Aston Martin that sold for $26,000. And then the next lot came up. It was a 1992 Aston Martin Virage that sold for $20,000. So you could have somebody bought the car for less than these technical drawings went for. But this
for what it's worth, that Virage was not a great car.
Yeah, but so the estimated price was 50 to 70.
Yeah.
And it sold for $20,000. Another one, the DB7 2003, sold for $35,000. So, there was definitely some softness to the market. But that could be, it's also a combination. These are global events. These are global, global buyers. And I think that Brexit is certainly playing a role in the global uncertainty, the tariffs. There's other external factors that are coming into play when we think about, the people that are buying at auctions and at Sotheby's.
Oh,
because,
I mean,
these are high-end people.
Look, right now, on the eve of a deep recession, you should convert all of your holdings into cash to stuff in the mattress. Cars are not a good investment right now. But yeah, it'll sort of run in cycles. I mean, I think we're also just seeing interest shift from what it had been to a different type and class of car. Like it's sort of like the bring a trailer effect, just sort of writ large. Like the weird, less old stuff is now starting to command just insane prices for stuff that was just old cars not too long ago.
Well, I think we're starting to see the baby boomer effect.
Yeah, where they're leaving.
No, like the muscle cars and stuff. They're coming into retirement and they have some money to spend.
Oh yeah. Well, muscle cars they had a peak and it fell off a bit. I think I guess we'll see as it plays out. I'd expect to see the post muscle car era stuff start to also move up in price as well.
I mean, a 1973 Volkswagen Thing went for $33,000.
Well, you can't restore one more cheaply.
Right. And then the 1956 Volkswagen 23 window, Samba bus, $100,000. However, the estimate was 155 to 195.
Yeah.
So I think that actually was a little bit of a disappointment for them.
Probably lost money.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, it's awesome.
Yeah.
So the market's definitely changing.
Just I'm not going to tell anybody my favorite stuff because I want to keep it cheap.
You're funny.
All right. So Sam, we have anything else to cover? Or are we
do you want to just acknowledge the death of Ferdinand Piech?
Sure. Ferdinand Piech is kaput.
Oh my God! You're so disrespectful.
That's not disrespectful.
But Piech was the grandson of the original Ferdinand Porsche. He had an amazing career. He was at Porsche. He was behind the Porsche 917. One of the all-time great endurance racing cars. During his tenure at Audi, running Audi engineering, he created Quattro, which has become synonymous with Audi, and was the first really successful modern high performance all wheel drive system, and then later went on to run Volkswagen, the Volkswagen brand, and then the entire Volkswagen group. And he was a brilliant engineer, but extremely difficult to work for, and he instilled a culture within the Volkswagen group, within the various brands, which ultimately may have come back to bite the company, because of the, this culture that, did not allow people to say no, or to push back against management. And, under his successor, Martin Winterkorn, that's when Dieselgate happened. And, I think without that culture that Piech had originally instilled in the company, it's possible that Dieselgate might not have happened. But then, we might not also have this flood of electric Volkswagens and Porsches and other stuff that's coming down the pipe in the next few months. So,
yeah, well, and we may not have had the greatest achievements of Volkswagen over the last 30 years either.
No, absolutely true. Yeah.
His hand is in all of the Volkswagen stuff. That is just the most amazing and dynamic. I mean, they had a string of hits from the A4 in 1994, 95 when it debuted. Just a string of cars that were all just engineered in their own way. They weren't copying anybody. They were pushing what could be done. They're a terrible long-term ownership experience unless you like to repair them. But you look at them and just the way those cars were designed and built and executed. There's a real common thread.
He was in large part responsible for Volkswagen becoming, if not the largest, one of the two largest automakers in the world.
Yeah. I definitely don't agree with the management style. I think that you do need to push your teams to achieve what they may think initially is impossible, but you don't need to do it with fear and with just like, I think there's other ways to instill that same kind of achievement, I suppose.
It was sort of the anti-empowerment movement.
Yeah.
Culture there.
But it also came as a shock. I mean, 82 is, it's not young, but that's not necessarily that old these days. So,
no, but there's a big difference between as you get into your 80s, you start to age.
Yeah.
And, he wasn't exactly, renowned as someone who took life easily. He lived. Let's put it that way.
Well, good for him. I I may not make it to my 80s either. Your star burns bright but hot.
So rest in peace.
Yeah. Or in typical Volkswagen fashion, rest in pieces. I'm sorry. Can't help it.
You actually missed an opportunity. You could have said rust in pieces.
Rust in pieces. Well, they rust before they rust. All right. This has been Wheelbearings number 121. Then we did another podcast, and we'll come back again for another one soon. So thanks, everybody, for listening, and you know where to find us. Definitely catch our poll on Twitter about whether you have a manual or a Prindle. And we'll see everybody next time.
Yeah, and I'd love to find out what manuals those are. And Twitter, so write us.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.